sensing for a dozen millennia. But what's next? How will you end this story? Listen, I know a good ending. Elegant and refined. The hero defeats a deity in battle. Impressed, it grants the victor power and immortality. The hero enters the chambers of the deity to become his champion and herald. Eternal, powerful, equally glorified both in the first world and in Golarion. His kingdom healed from its wounds and flourished under the rule of the immortal champion. A beautiful ending, isn't it? And this legend is yours for the asking.
Trust the laughing lie. Don't do this. Not after everything you and I have endured because of him. I can give you immortality and power, though not as much as the Lantern Kings. Perhaps we won't be able to stand against the eldest, but...
How sad it is to hear you, Nyrissa. Thousands of years for nothing! You haven't learned a single lesson. Never learned to atone. But what do you say? Well, that is easy. I will return your kingdom to Golarion and strengthen its connection to the First World. In their homeland, the Fae can endlessly return to life. I will give to you the same gift. And so long as you remain an enclave of the First World, death within its borders will never threaten you. As for the prize, I'm offering you the position of a servant. Believe it or not, I am lonely. Divine power and immortality are a heavy burden. To accept it means losing all your friends and companions, but you can find allies and reliable assistance. This is what I'm looking for. A herald and a general with whom I can share eternity, and together we'll play 1,000 wonderful pranks and spread our power across the First World and further, much further. What do you think? I can let my misguided protege go wherever she likes. But knowing her, I'm doubtful she will become a humble exile.
I won't. I've come too far to go back. It might take me 1,000 years and thousands of deaths, but I will find a way to get back at you, eldest. Even if he betrays our alliance and becomes your puppet. I suggest we do not kneel. We are both cursed, you and I. But so what? The curse can harm you only as much as affliction touches your kingdom. But now, with the eldest wounded and bleeding, his henchmen all slain, I can return your state to the material plane. It will heal its wounds, and so will you. I'll create a bond between you and the First World, granting you immortality. Just as the Lantern King promises.
And what role in all this shall I play, Trespasser?
The role of the vanquished. I know you will hardly accept a defeat, eldest. You may try to attack us again, but we defeated you once. And we will do it again if we must. I'm ready to fight you forever if I have to.
Did I tell you I don't like dying? Well, I don't. Perhaps we should stop this pointless exercise and speak seriously? So you plan to entertain me for all eternity? Or do you think you can still outplay me, Trespasser?
Pretty words, eldest. Save them for our next encounter. You pretend to laugh, but I see how shamed you are. What a deep wound you've suffered this day. It won't be the last, believe me. We've come a long way together. First as enemies, then as allies. I mark you with my gift. A bond to the First World. Eternal youth and immortality. We are the cursed king and queen. Each in their own kingdoms, their own world. But henceforth inextricably entwined. Eternity awaits. And possibly eternal war with a deceitful deity. But so what? It is our eternity. And perhaps in the end, we will rule not kingdoms, but whole worlds.
Now that the eldest and other spiteful beings wouldn't be bothering us, the king returned to his subjects and celebrated the victory and the end of the kingdom's miseries with great fanfare. Everything gradually returned to normal, including our exciting lives. Not always peaceful, but also not troubled by invasions from another world. And little by little, our heroes and the common folk began to forget the sorrows of the past. So the kingdom returned to Golarion, but not without taking a piece of the first world with it. Miracles and strange occurrences, both kind and cruel, became the norm. Not that the citizens hadn't grown used to that. Of course, the Lantern King wasn't thrilled with the way things worked out, but who cares? Our leader and Nyrissa, the cursed king and queen, are ever ready to face the power of the eldest. Until that time comes, our leader spends a lot of time in the First World, learning its secrets and testing his new powers. The immortal king and his kingdom became a legend come true in Golarion. The kingdom built by our hero became an example for all its neighbors. What else would you expect? The Stolen Lands became the only place where the citizens sincerely toast the health of their ruler. The citizens lived trouble-free, and taxes made it to the treasury without losses. A powerful army guards the peace. Exploration of magic is on par. The temples are flooded with their congregations. And, most importantly, our cultural contributions are at least the equal of Absalom. Just half a year after the war with the First World, Galt moved its troops to the southern border of the kingdom. Their attack was rebuffed. The enemy state's infantry could do little against soldiers who were skilled with their swords and knew the military arts better than the alphabet. Since then, Galt hasn't risked crossing any borders again, fearing cruel retaliation for further insolence. The kingdom reached incredible heights in the development of magical arts. Sorcerers, wizards, and other initiates feel like kids in a candy store in the Stolen Lands. Sadly, ordinary subjects aren't so thrilled. They have to deal with the consequences of careless experiments and failed magical tests. How do you turn the Stolen Lands, savage and unruly, into a stronghold of safety and stability? The king found an answer by tripling or even quadrupling the number of guards. These guards consider themselves something of a privileged class, of course, allowed much more leniency than anyone else. But the ordinary citizens, feeling safe and secure, prefer to just overlook the discrepancy. The king became a true patron of fine crafts. Over time, the castle treasury filled with wonderful gifts from the best masters in the area. Armor, weapons, even magical artifacts. And the collection is still growing. No kingdom can function without its nobility, and the kingdom in the Stolen Lands is no exception. Landowners, ready to share the burden of ruling alongside the king, grew to be more and more influential over time. And the more pompous the court balls and receptions held by dukes and baronets became, the more eventful were the lives of the schemers and freeloaders who always live within the shadows of the powerful. Using necromancy in service to the state is a solution as bold as it is desperate. Pharasma's church still makes frequent, and frankly reasonable, plans to send a massive crusade against the Stolen Lands to cleanse the nest of vice. The kingdom's citizens, however, not only yielded to the use of an undead workforce, they actually supported it. After all, someone has to do the most dangerous, most unpleasant work. The feud between Brevois North and South, which had been smoldering for ages, never sparked the fires of civil war. Through great effort, our king managed to bring both parties to the negotiating table. While Rostland didn't gain its independence, it did receive wide autonomy rights. Our relationships with both House Sertova and the Sword Lords are respectful, but they've become lukewarm. Because of us, neither side got everything they wanted. Chandra Merve returned to our court, but just half a year later she was poisoned. No one found out who did it or why. The Tiger Lords found it difficult to recuperate after what Armagh did to them. The barbarians remaining in Numeria weren't very happy that we sheltered the deposed chief and his supporters, but they were too afraid of him to attack us over it. That bomb has a long fuse, but it's definitely burning. I'm afraid that a few generations down the road, the grandchildren of the current Tiger Lords may want to retaliate against us for their grandfathers. Having lost their city guard, Pitax was plunged into chaos. Soon, another power was born from among the gangs fighting to redistribute the wealth, and a much more dangerous one. Revolutionaries, dreaming of regaining Pitax's independence. Troops had to be stationed in the city, and the rebels responded with arson and political assassinations throughout the kingdom. Pitax was a headache for us for a long time. Governor Liacenza became one of the first victims of the revolutionaries. A fireball was thrown into his carriage in the middle of the street. There was no place for art in the new Pitax. Students and teachers from the academy were scattered to the winds. Some found a place in neighboring courts, while others set off to earn some coin in roadside taverns. A third group, harboring anger and resentment toward the king, began weaving revolutionary plots. The ruins of the Academy of the Arts still stand in the middle of the city, overrun with ivy, empty and unwanted. Bartholomew Delgado still serves the king loyally. From time to time, he orders peculiar mechanisms and substances from all corners of the world. After receiving them, he spends a few days bragging about some great discovery he's about to make, then ends up gloomy for a few months. Then he receives another package, and the process repeats itself. At night, chilling screams are often heard from his laboratory. Unfortunately, without its founder, Varnhold never really recovered from the blow. Over time, the colony withered away, all the more so when its dwellers continued to disappear under mysterious circumstances. It took less than 2 years for Varnhold to permanently become a ghost town. The only person happy about the news was the king's new advisor, a mysterious and powerful wizard who still serves the ruler loyally to this day. After the kobolds and mites disappeared, the empty caves beneath the old sycamore quickly became home to all kinds of disgusting critters, giant centipedes being the most innocent and pleasant of them. Attempts have been made to clear out the caves, but it never takes long for something to take up residence again. In the end, the decision was made to block the entrances and burn the giant tree down, destroying the roots that held up the ceiling of the caves. Oleg's trading post continues to thrive, attracting even more travelers. Much to its owner's displeasure, a small town is springing up around it. Despite Oleg's grumbling, he and his wife are well regarded by everyone, and Svetlana was even elected town chief. Making sure her sister was safe, the former bandit Kressel traveled south. Her trail went cold somewhere in Absalom's docks. They say she changed her name again and now serves on a trade ship, hiding from old acquaintances. Jod and Keston, after surviving the bloom, remained loyal to the king they followed through thick and thin, and they continue to serve as court advisors to this day. The austere priest and the gloomy warrior regularly argue over the proper way to govern the state, as well as which of the two rulers should hear out first. Some things never change. Keston Gares took a post as chief of the kingdom's guard. The former heir to a noble family never returned to Brevoy, severing all ties to his kin. However, a few years after the victory over the First World, a girl arrived from Brevoy and soon married Keston. They say Keston started smiling a lot more after that. Jod remained loyal to the king to the end of his days, healing the sick and generously sharing his austere wisdom with anyone who wished to hear it, and some who didn't. having fulfilled his duty to the ruler, Erastel's priest peacefully departed this world, surrounded by friends and disciples. Tisana, Lamashtu's priestess, didn't remain in the king's service for long. One night, she just disappeared from the castle and set off for the kingdom's borders, preaching to anyone who would listen and granting the needy the blessing of the Mother of Monsters. Well, there are many like Tisana in the Stolen Lands now, because the king announced their religion lawful within his lands. I'm afraid the ruler and his advisors would regret that decision on more than a few occasions. In the last year alone, 3 squadrons of Lomede's paladins arrived in the kingdom. Having participated in Lamashtu's ritual, Olika gave birth to a strong and healthy baby. Sadly, the child grew into an unruly and violent adolescent. Having maimed a peer at just 10 years of age, the boy escaped to the Gnarl Marches, fleeing the rage of a mob that tore his mother to pieces instead. No one knows what happened to the lad, but legends of Lamashtu's child, who sometimes kills lost travelers and sometimes leads them to safety, are passed on by word of mouth throughout the area. Breinhardt became a loyal ally and trade partner of the kingdom, and Darwin himself had been seen as a frequent guest in the capital. The elegant monarch of the neighboring kingdom has broken many hearts at court. After his visits, many young guards and servants have been seen staring through windows, sighing wistfully about something. The Fae took a fancy to the kingdom, feeling totally at home here. They often play various pranks, but they never do any serious harm. Falcos and Teresia managed to restore the magic forest. Once freed of the anger of the Scythe Tree, people returned to the abandoned village, and it became a haven of friendship between the Fae and ordinary people, just like old times. The lizard folk of the Longtail tribe returned to live on the shores of Candlemere, but they couldn't return to their ancient way of life. Living alongside people, the lizard folk adopted their behaviors, habits, and even religion. More and more of the Longtail tribe pray not to the spirits of their ancestors, but to Erastil or Gorum. They even began to forget their original language. I hope someone writes down their songs and legends before they all sink into oblivion. A delegation of wizards from Absalom and other areas appeared in the kingdom one day, asking for permission to examine the lair of the Lich Farneris the Thoughtful. After completing their research, the wizards spent a long time thanking the king for freeing the world of that monster. In their opinion, he'd been capable of causing the end of the world, maybe even 2 worlds. The Sweet Teeth departed on a journey, hoping to see as many wonders as possible of this world and others. They keep sending us news from every corner of the map. Their bright painted wagon, drawn by a bull mastodon, crisscrosses Golarion, somehow appearing in the center of one incredible story after another. Evindra was glad to see the Lantern King's plans turn to dust. She spent some time helping restore the kingdom after the calamity, then returned home to the First World. They say the rebellious spirit of her cousin Nyrissa awoke within her as well. Evindra is said to recount our story to the Fae, encouraging them to question the power and might of the eldest. After the victory, the storyteller abandoned his affairs and began spending a lot of time alone in contemplation. He eventually bid farewell to the king and left his lands, but I suspect the inhabitants of Golarion haven't heard the last of this mysterious traveler, for his own story is hardly finished. Amiri remained a pariah to her native tribe, but she stayed close friends with Nylak, who ruled the Six Bears wisely and taught them to survive in the unfamiliar plains and cities. The restless barbarian would often travel for long stretches of time, but sooner or later she would always return to her old friends, bragging about new scars and recounting new feats, many of which Nylak immortalized in song. Valerie stayed to serve the king, and to this day she continues to be a muse to many people. Not just bards and admirers, but to warriors as well. Honest and resilient, Valerie is not just famous for her feats in battle, but also for her patience and kindness, which she says the king helped her discover within herself. Harren became famous, respected by dwarves throughout our kingdom as well as our neighbors, even as far as the Five Kings Mountains. He's often been asked to help out or teach others, and he's never denied anyone, despite his grumbling. Some people even listen to his preaching. Lucky for us, there's a lot less howling about the end of the world now, and more wise words of moderation and humility. Not all of his disciples turned to Grotus, but everyone took away something useful from his teachings. One moonless night, Jaethal mysteriously disappeared. Soon, frightened fishers discovered her body, really truly dead now. A young elf named Nortellara came to the funeral, claiming to be the daughter of the deceased. She didn't grieve for her mother overmuch, and she began carousing almost straight away, moving from balls to feasts to hunts. She acquired a crowd of admirers and treated the king as though they'd known each other 100 years or more. Some even assumed they were, particularly close. After the war ended, Ekin hung up his bow on the wall and traded the path of the ranger in for the craft of the carpenter. It may not be the most heroic ending to a tragic story like his, but as Torag is my witness, Ekin's happy with it, as is Alina, who became his wife and is bearing his child. Any baby born into this family will be pretty lucky, since the king himself still visits his old friend and will likely become the child's patron. As for Knock Knock, Hero Knock Knock, he continued his questionably heroic efforts in the Stolen Lands. Despite whatever mess he fell into, no matter the danger he leapt into, he always seemed to scrape through just a little better off than before. Like true heroes, he simply never gave up, struggling on and meeting the challenge of each new day with a spirit that no mishap or misfortune could ever quell. The slightly inaccurate statue of him and the king still stands in the square to this day. The two figures side by side. I've always felt that, while the heights may be a bit off, let's say, it accurately reflects the size and spirit of the goblin hero who'd been nurtured by the teachings of his king. Tartuk, who never succeeded in restoring his gnome appearance, seems to have completely forgotten about who he once was. It no longer bothers him, for now the purple kobold has become a real king to his tribe. Keeping his word to the king, Tartuk and his subjects behave themselves, living peacefully with the citizens of nearby settlements. Some of the reptiles even managed to find work digging wells and dungeons in people's settlements. For a small fee, of course. Kalika remained in the kingdom, though her desire to witness the world's wonders keeps driving her to take long journeys. But when she is home, she spends much of her spare time with her sister. They don't quarrel anymore, and have stopped dragging each other into trouble. Kanera settled down in the capital and became a very busy entrepreneur. It seems as though every hour is planned, meeting with rich merchants or inventors whose work she's promoting. But on her way home, she never fails to stop at the market to personally buy some sweets for her sister. Between Kanera's business sense and Kalika's charm, they founded and successfully run not one, but 3 organizations. A trading house, a shelter for tiefling children, and a school of magic devoted to Nethys. The king had to make a lot of difficult decisions, but Octavia was always there to make his life easier. Closer than any other advisor, and more loyal than any other ally, she prompted an elegant exit out of difficult situations a good many times. Such love could only be envied by the monarchs of more noble families, themselves tied down with the bonds of dynastic marriages. Their wedding was legendary, Octavia became a real queen. Only old friends would be able to recognize the Grand Dame as that giggling lass they used to share tales with by the fire. As for myself, the author of this book, Lindsay, who never chose a pretty nickname, I'm still here, inside my creation within the Capitol Library. I live just like I always dreamed, surrounded by people and books, and not a day goes by without someone turning my pages. My story inspired many others to take up the quill. My readers have written many fierce books, articles, and pamphlets, flinging truth in the faces of tyrants. What more could I dream of? I hope, oh honored reader, that this story offered you some daring ideas. Or at least some entertainment. In any case, it's time to set the final period.